from the Mahabharata. It's a love story called Savatri. In India, there was once a king. His name was Ashwapati, and he was a wise and noble ruler. And while his reign lasted, his people prospered, his country was at peace, and everyone was happy. He and his wife desperately wanted a child, and they prayed for many, many years intensely for a son. And then they beseeched the goddess Savatri, and they prayed more than 100,000 mantras to her, for she was the goddess of long life and longevity and life itself. And their prayers were answered. The queen gave birth to a daughter, and in honor of the goddess who granted their prayers, they named their daughter Savatri. And their daughter grew into a young woman with grace and wisdom and dignity and such intelligence and so many, many accomplishments. When it came time for her to marry, no man asked for her hand. They were scared that she was an incarnation of the goddess herself. And her father called her into his chambers and said, Savatri, weak men shrink from your radiance. You are going to have to go into the world and find a man who is worthy of you. How will I know, Father? How will I know? Savatri, you will know. You will know. And so Savatri, with two of her father's trusted advisors, traveled for many, many months. And one day they happened to go through a forest where a place existed where people from all sorts of different kingdoms came and lived on the land. And they came there to study and pray. And when Savatri entered the house of worship and stood in front of the sacred fire, she saw out of the corner of her eye a young man entered. And when she looked, the young man was with an elderly man who was blind. And when her eyes met the young man, her life felt like it expanded. She felt like she could breathe in a way she had never ever felt breath before. She felt her life force vanish from her and enter this young man the way clear water does in a new clay pot. She felt her life force, her life itself, her skin was like parched earth being nourished by the most gentle, sweet spring rain. Who is he? And one of the teachers said, why, that is Prince Satyavan. His name means son of truth. There is no more worthy or virtuous young man. And when Savatri arrived back at her father's house, why, she ran into his chambers, and her father was conversing with a great sage, Narada, who is said to be able to see past, present, and future. And when she came into the room, her father stopped talking and said, Savatri, I can see by the flush in your cheeks and the sparkle in your eye that you have met someone that you would like me to arrange a marriage for. Yes, Father, I have. His name is Prince Satyavan. He does not live in a palace. His father is the King Damyat Sen. His father had a very strange accident right after Satyavan was born, and he went blind. And while he was blind, his enemies took over his kingdom and sent him into exile in the forest. And Satyavan takes care of his parents there. Ah, said Narada. Your daughter speaks the truth. Satyavan is a very noble, very virtuous young man. But she must choose another, for it is destined that Satyavan will die in 1 year's time. Savatri was devastated. But she looked at her father and said, Father, I will marry no one but Satyavan. What is it you have taught me about time? That time doesn't matter. A year, a month, a day, a moment. When you have the opportunity to love once, deeply and truly. Ah! Your daughter's love is stronger than death. Let her marry Satyavan. And so they were married. And Savatri left her jewels, her crown, her silks, her robes, and she went to live in the forest. It was not an easy life. She helped take care of Satyavan's elderly parents. And every day, their love, their laughter, their joy, their delight in being together deepened and grew. And only Savatri knew that their days were numbered. And 4 days before Satyavan was destined to die, Savatri went into the house of worship, and she fasted and prayed, no eating, no sleeping, for 3 days and 3 nights. And on the morning of the 4th, she emerged, and Satyavan was waiting for her. He said, "My dearest, let me gather some fruits and build a fire to nourish your body and warm your bones. I will be back." "No," she said, "I will go with you." And taking his hand, they walked through the forest, giggling and laughing. And she watched her strong husband chop down trees until suddenly the axe flew from his hand and he clutched his head. "Oh, I have such a headache." "Put your head down. Put your head in my lap, my dear." And as his head was in her lap, she saw the color fading from his cheeks. She saw his chest, breath, grow smaller and smaller. And then she became aware of a presence beside her. And when she looked, there was the tallest, thinnest man she'd ever seen, wearing crimson robes with a top knot on his head. "Who are you, and why have you come?" "Ah, you are so sensitive, my child. Most people never know I am here. I am Yama, the god of death." "But why have you come? Why haven't you sent one of your messengers?" "Your husband's life was so virtuous. I wanted to do him the honor of coming myself." And with that, he pulled a small noose from his robe and reached down into Satyavan's body and removed a likeness of Satyavan that was no larger than his thumb. And he put that likeness, the life force, in his robe and said, "Your husband will be very happy where he is going." And he turned and walked away. And Savatri gently put down her husband's head, and she followed. "Where my husband goes, I go. Is it not true that a wife may be faithful to her husband even after he is dead?" "Yes, yes, it is true. But the living cannot go to the place where the dead are. Turn around, you must go and prepare your husband's funeral. I will give you one boon, one wish, but do not ask for the life of your husband." "Thank you. I wish that my father-in-law's eyesight be returned to him." "It is done." And Yama turned and began to walk away again. And Savatri followed. "Excuse me, pardon my disobedience, but it is rare that I get to converse with someone with such great virtue. You say you are the Lord of Death, but are you not the Lord of Life as well?" "Ah, yes, yes. Few people understand that. Most misunderstood and think of me as evil. I have often wondered about the true nature of compassion. It is easy to be kind to one's family and friends, but it is much more difficult to be kind to one's enemies." "Yes, yes, it is true. And if more people understood this, the world and people would be much happier. You speak so intelligently. I will give you one more wish, but do not ask for the life of your husband." "Thank you. I I wish that my father-in-law's lands be returned to him. It is done. And Yama turned and walked away again. And again Savatri followed. Please, please, you know, it is so rare that I get to talk with someone who has such a wealth of knowledge. Please let me ask you some more questions. And they stopped and conversed for quite a long time, until Savatri was so obviously cold. She was shaking. Her bones had never felt such terror of cold before. And Yama saw her and said, "We must stop. You must return. You cannot come any further. But I will give you one boon, one more wish." "Thank you. My father and mother wanted a son, but they could not have one. Would you grant me 15 sons in my lifetime?" "Yes. You shall have 15 valiant and courageous sons. Now you must turn back and go no further." And this time Yama walked away, and Savatri obeyed. But she called after him, "Yama!" And he turned around. "Your voice is so beautiful I can barely resist you. Have I not answered all of your questions? Or do you want another wish?" "Yes. You said, Yama, that a wife may be faithful to her husband after death. And you gave me 15 sons. I need the life of my husband in order to give birth to the 15 sons." And Yama smiled, and he did what he had never ever done before. He gave back a life. And Savatri bowed. She touched the ground with her body in the 7 sacred places, thanking him, and then ran back to her husband. And she picked up his head, and she caressed his cheeks as his life returned to his body. And he stood up and said, "Savatri, I had the strangest dream. I dreamt that Yama was standing next to me. What? We best go home. It is getting dark, and I know my parents will be worried." And when they returned home, the king's eyesight had been restored, and messengers had come, telling him it was safe for him to return to his kingdom. And the queen came over to Savatri and said, "Where have you been? We have been so worried." And Savatri simply replied, "We traveled much further than we expected."